Well, let's say you're a toy maker and you want to make an action figure. You want to make an action figure of a very popular superhero. Oh, I don't know, let's just say Iron Man. Okay, Spider-Man, for the sake of the visual. Well, you've got to look at what color Spider-Man is. And for anyone who hasn't been living under a rock for the last 60 years, you know that Spider-Man, for the most part, is red and blue, except, of course, when he's not. But let's go with traditional Spider-Man here, right? All right, so you're going to want to make the toy based on his primary color. Problem with Spider-Man is he's kind of 50% blue, 50% red. So you have to sort of pick your poison. The problem with this is once you pick your color, well, the opposite color is going to shine through the toy as pins in the joints. So these are the little circles here that are in like knees and elbows, etc. They're basically what hold a traditional action figure together and allow the articulation to work. The problem with a character like Spider-Man, who's 50% blue and 50% red, is, well, the opposite color tends to shine through as a pin, and it makes the toy look less cool for a collector who wants, no scuffs and no markings. You can't usually paint over the pin joints because, well, if you think regular toys get scuffed up, if you painted a pin joint every time you move that joint, it would scuff the pin. The solution for most toys is to pick one color that is the primary color for a figure and make the pins out of that. And this works with some figures who are, 80% one single color. So Icer here, it was pretty easy to cast him in blue plastic, if you will. You want to use as few plastics as possible as far as colored plastics because every time you change the plastic color, it costs time and money. We're going to get into that in a moment. But I want to give a little bit of a background on what's called action figure or toy base color. So ideally, your characters, villains, heroes, sidekicks, whoever, are primarily one color. Very easy for Vulture here to be cast in green plastic. Now, there's a difference between a prototype of a figure that's being painted and then what's called a first shot. So the first shot is usually the figure that you see online that more often than not has what might be thought of as very odd color choices that would never ship as a product until they actually start shipping as a product because doing first shot figures is now a thing. We'll get more into that in a moment. All right, so think of the plastic kind of like one of those old Play-Doh factories where you're squeezing out, and when you're doing the first shot, you're basically using whatever color is in the Play-Doh machine, or in this case, the injection molded machine, which is why first shots wind up coming out in really exotic, strange colors that legs and arms don't often match torsos and heads, like this version that they are now selling as a first shot figure. Go figure, no pun intended, that would become a thing. But yes, the reason that these figures exist, where the characters in all sorts of rainbow crazy colors, is because they're creating this first shot simply as proof of concept. So they say to the vendor, we just need a plastic articulated version, non-painted. So they'll just pump that out in whatever colors happen to be in the machine at the time. And sometimes you get really cool stuff. You might get, they might have clear, sparkly blue plastic in the machine, or they might just have green. Whatever it is, that's what's going to come out. And for some reason, pink tends to be one that's in the machines a lot. Maybe it's because they're working on girl toys. I don't know what. Not that boys can't have pink stuff. But yeah, a lot of the first shots that I saw, especially at Mattel on things like Masters of the Universe Classics, tended to have a lot of pink involved. And so, yeah, I did wind up keeping a few that I got officially signed out because I thought they were pretty cool and they were characters I really liked. But come on, who doesn't need Vicor and Chief Carnivus in full pink-orange attire? Hey, there's a market for this. Even Castle Grayskull had to have a first shot prototype. And again, just sort of spit it out in whatever color happened to be in the machine at the time. They were probably working on yellow toys and green toys the day before, and when we said we needed the prototype castle, that's what showed up. But when you move to actual production, it's ideal, as I noted in the beginning with the Spider-Man and Vulture examples, to pick the most prominent color. Now, sometimes figures are created with just the plastic and no paint. The example here is K3PO from Hoth Base, from Echo Base. That's the white C3PO versus the gold C3PO that we all know, or the white protocol droid. he's had a few figures, and every time he's had a figure, Hasbro has cast him in just white plastic with very minimal deco. Pretty much the eyes, and some of them have that splatter shot on the chest. Some of the versions later on just had the 2 red dots. I can't believe this figure has had like 3 different action figures for a character that was in the background. But the point is, he was almost always just cast in white plastic, and that was it. And the problem is when you cast a figure in plastic, it tends to look a little cheap. That's why Frosta here in the Masters of the Universe Classics line was not done in bright white plastic. The designers at the time felt that that made her look very cheap, kind of like that K3PO. All right, but the real elephant in the room is black plastic. And I know in particular this is a bane of a lot of Masters of the Universe Classic collectors, when in kind of the middle of the line, 2012, 2013, we started doing a lot of figures that were cast in black. Well, there is a reason for that, and it really came down to cost and time, and I wish it was a meeting I was involved in. I so do, because I found out after the fact. So engineering had been tasked by their heads to find their heads, the heads of their department, the department heads, to find cost-effective solutions to making modular figures, figures that have shared parts, you know, the same arms, the same torsos, etc., etc. It's what's called a buck system. And one of the things that was proposed at this internal engineering meeting, which I was not part of or aware of, that happened until well after the fact, was that if the figures were cast in black, that would be the most universal, and the parts could be used for many, many figures. So if you had, let's just say, 10 figures coming up that use the same basic body, arms, legs, and chest, if you produce them all at once and you used black, which was the easiest color to paint over, well, that would be cost saving. And if you can basically, spit out of the plastic injection mold machine the same thing over and over and over again, the more you can do, the less expensive your charge. So if you could do the chest, arm, and legs for 5 different figures at once, spitting out all the same parts just over and over and over again, it's actually less expensive than you're going back for every single individual figure. And for the most part, this is a DC Universe sheet, but same thing applies for Masters of the Universe Classics and other toy lines, Marvel Legends, using shared buck parts. A buck is a standard body, and then unique parts like heads and capes and backpacks get added in. You can see that in the red on that image. So quite a few figures in the Masters of the Universe Classic line wound up being painted over in black plastic because this was a cost-saving measure that engineering initiated, that if they made all of the parts for, think 6 months or a year's worth of product at once, they'd get charged less versus doing each figure individually. The problem was when the black plastic scratched, fans and myself, because again, I found out about this after the fact, we were not happy because black really shows up in a scratch mark, as opposed to Icer. If he was scratched, you wouldn't see it as badly because he was cast in blue-white plastic. Well, the way that all of these kind of problems at Mattel are settled is always with a pie fight. Usually it's banana cream, but I like it when they do French vanilla. And man, Brittany Pratt from engineering and I had quite a pie fight. And let's just say in the end, we agreed to disagree, but at least we were going to make sure we communicated better. And if all the figures were suddenly going to be cast in black plastic, she was going to let me know ahead of time instead of surprising me when fans found out. So yeah, that was a fun time to be the brand manager. All right, so back to our original example of Spider-Man and the whole pins that poke out in the joints. So now you understand that with the injection molding machine that is making all these plastic parts, you want to try to make as many as possible without changing the color. Every time you change the color, it costs money. Hence why first shots look like this and are crazy colors. So when you have a figure you need to paint, the idea is to find a color that can use as few colors as possible. That way you could run it once through the machine and then paint over it. Sometimes you have to run multiple colors. In this case, this Spider-Man has both red and blue molded parts. But, of course, the red molded parts shine through the blue and the blue through the red. One of the other problems with pin joints is they do have a habit of snapping after a while because, well, it's older technology. I mean, pin joints have been around for decades and decades, but they do have a tendency that if played with a lot, they break. One of the things I love that Hasbro is doing that I think is amazing are these new pinless joints they're using on Marvel Legends and Star Wars Black Series. It makes the figures look much more like statues than toys, and really great on the shelf. So I absolutely applaud what they're doing here. But yeah, until we find ways to lower the cost of plastic, you may still see odd colors showing up as a base color. And black gets chosen a lot simply because it's the most universal for painting over. And minus the scratches that happen, of course, after the fact. I hope this video explained a little bit more about base color, first shots, why black plastic is used. If I missed anything or you want more details, just let me know in the comments below. I'm always checking them and responding to as many as I can. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.